Hey, welcome to Real Talk, where I give real answers to real questions from real worship leaders. If you are a real worship leader with a real question and you want a real answer, head right here and submit your question for a future episode. Got some good questions this week? Let's talk about it. I'm fairly new in a worship leader role at my church. We've been working through a bit of a rebuilding phase in my first 8 months here, and it's been great. I've struggled recently responding to church members, not specifically serving in the worship ministry, who request hearing specials from particular people, which is not in our current worship ministry structure at all and probably won't be. The verbiage in their requests really just make it sound like they want to hear someone they like sing a song that they like to hear. And it just doesn't sound like it's coming from a heart to worship the Lord at all. More to gratify oneself, even if they say the church would love it. Rather than just throw it in the suggestion box, I want to be able to respond in love and truth. How do I do that? Well, I applaud your insistence on you want to do it with love and truth. Let's do both of those. Try to do both of those. I've got the truth part down. We'll see if I have the love part down. Okay, so somebody comes up to us with a general suggestion. We won't even talk specifically about special music yet. Somebody comes up to us with a general suggestion, and we think to ourselves, that's not going to work because that's not why we do things the way that we do them here at our church. So how do you respond to that? Not just special music, but anything. What do? We explain to them that's not how we do things here because XYZ. And so I just want to use that as a general framework. You can use that as a general framework for any suggestion that you get. If you say, well, that doesn't really fulfill the purpose of our corporate worship gathering, then you can walk somebody through, this is why it doesn't fulfill the purpose of our corporate worship gathering. And so you could apply this to special music. You could apply this to even songs that your worship team suggests. If they're like, hey, I heard this really cool, I was going to pick on Casting Crowns again because I feel like they write some story songs like this, and I'm sure they're well aware that they probably aren't appropriate for corporate worship gatherings. But yeah, I heard this Casting Crown song on the radio yesterday, and you're like, that's just a story song and not appropriate for corporate worship. You can use it for that situation as well. What do we say? We say, thank you for your suggestion. When we plan services, when we pick songs, when we XYZ, these are the things that we think about when we make those decisions. And in doing so, you share the truth, which is what you want. You share the truth with the person who suggested whatever they suggested, which is what you want, right? You want truth. You share the truth with them. And I think that being clear is a way to love people. Because what would an unloving way to deal with this? By the way, we're going to get into specifics of what to actually say here for special music. I'm just giving you the general overview. What would an unloving way look like to deal with this situation or a similar situation where you get a suggestion? And by the way, I've been guilty of this before because sometimes it's just easier to do this. I've not been guilty of this, but number one, we could just be like, that's a stupid idea and we're not going to do that. That would be unloving. But why is it unloving? First of all, you called the person stupid, but also because you didn't explain it to them. But number two, and this is what I've been guilty of before because it's easier to do, you can just smile and say, okay, I'll think about that, but not explain to them why you're actually never going to do it. And that's unloving as well. It might not be as overtly unloving, but why is it unloving? It's because, once again, you didn't explain what you were going to do and why you are going to make the decision that you're going to make. And so if you want to be loving to people and answer them with love and truth, respond to it with love and truth, like you said, then we can love them by telling them the truth. So I'm going to assume that you have the same reasoning for not including special music in your service as I do, and maybe there's a few extra reasons than this. I don't always go into all of the reasons because I think that there is just a theological reason that I don't have special music in my worship services. But then there are also some of the other reasons that you talked about where you're like, I think somebody just wants to hear a song that they want to hear. I'm not going to tell somebody that. I think you just want to hear a song that you want to hear, even though you might think that that's the case. But here is the foundational reason. I would tell them, I know we've done that in the past because we've done that in the past here at my church. We haven't done it in a long time, but we used to have that at my church. And I would tell them, when we plan songs for a Sunday service, Our goal is to get everybody to sing together because, why? Let's point to the Bible. Because Colossians 3:16 says that we are to teach and admonish one another with all wisdom, sing psalms, hymns, and spiritual songs. And that one anothering is not just a person up there singing at people, singing to people. It is the entire church singing together. This is the uniqueness of corporate worship, is that when we gather with the church, it is not just one person singing and other people taking it in. It is the church singing together, worshiping God, edifying each other through that singing, by teaching and admonishing one another and glorifying God at the same time. And so when I plan the musical part of our worship services, I don't just want it to be one person singing, whether that's just me singing. I hope I'm never viewed as the one person who is singing on a Sunday morning. We really are intentional about not picking songs that have solos in them. We want everybody singing all the time, which, by the way, is a sort of an aside here. If you have people on your worship team where you're singing solos, then I don't really know if you can make this argument. So think about your own worship ministry, because I could see the case where somebody says, oh, this person wants to do special music, but they aren't on the worship team, but our worship team does special music, and we pick songs that other people don't sing along with, and it's just kind of us up there performing. If you do that, then you can't make this argument. So if you do that, either have a different argument where you would say, the people that we have up front, we want them to be vetted, as in their musical skill, but also their ability to lead spiritually. And the best way to do that is to have them go through the process of being on the worship team. That might be a separate argument that you can use. But bottom line, you should take them to the Bible, because the Bible is our authority, and you should explain to them why you make the decisions that you make in your service because of what you believe about the Bible. And hopefully that's what I modeled with Colossians 3:16. I'm sure there's some other arguments that you could draw from there, but that's the one that I always think of. So there's no need to get into this person is just looking to gratify themselves. They're not really interested in worshiping God. Maybe they think that is a good way to worship God in a corporate gathering. And what do? We bring them back to the Word and say, this is God's plan for how we're supposed to worship together when we worship together. When we gather together on a Sunday morning, we should all be singing together. So explain the decision that you're making clearly to them and teach them what the Bible says. Our small town church is stepping into a blended service once a month. As we begin, there's a desire, but just a few have stepped forward to help. Right now, I'm looking just to add perhaps 3 songs to our service, and we will need pre-recorded options as instrumentation is not an option. Yes, I can Google, but since I've watched several of your episodes, you seem open to sharing. Thoughts on a good product to utilize? All right, I'm going to give you an answer to 2 different questions here. The first will be, what resources can you use for this? And the second one will be my thoughts on blended worship. First of all, I would just go to Reawaken Hymns. I'll link that down in the description below. Nathan Drake has a bunch of great resources that I think will be perfect for you. I think there's lyric videos, probably tracks and stuff. I don't know. I don't personally use it, but I've talked to Nathan a few times, and I know he's got a great resource for people who are interested in this sort of thing, which I guess, now that I think about it, when I hear blended worship, I get the sense that there is an older crowd who wants traditional hymns and a newer crowd who wants contemporary, which we'll talk about that in a second. So I kind of covered the traditional side, but I think, honestly, in most of these situations, especially if you're like, we should only do it once a month, you're probably trying to be pretty cautious of not introducing a ton of new contemporary songs, so to speak. And I think that Nathan does a great job of modernizing arrangements of hymns. He doesn't really change the arrangement of hymns necessarily. He just brings them so that you can play them with guitar and not have a billion chord changes. But I think that it is really a good middle ground between, we're going to maybe use some more modern instrumentation as opposed to an organ, but it's still going to be the hymns that the people at our church know and love, and they'll be able to sing along, which is ultimately the purpose of our corporate worship gathering anyways. We're not just trying to do new songs because we're tired of the old songs. We want to pick songs that teach people the theology that we need to teach them, because our songs are meant to teach and admonish one another, as we already talked about in the first question. But also, we want everybody to be singing together, which is what we talked about in the first question. And that leads me to my thoughts on blended worship. And it is always my fear with blended worship that we will create services where half the people will sing when we are doing traditional hymns and half the people will sing when we are doing contemporary songs. And that's not what we're aiming for in the church. Newsflash. We aren't called to be two separate churches who have two different preferences of music style and, oh, it's our turn to sing now, and oh, it's our turn to sing now. And I just fear that that's what blended worship usually creates. And I didn't always think that way, but I've gone through that thought process at my church here. A little history of the services at our church. We started off with a traditional service and a contemporary service. Then COVID hit and we moved to one service, and we kind of did it like a blended service where we had some hymns and we had some contemporary worship songs. And then once COVID sort of dissipated, we split back into traditional service, contemporary service, and then we realized, hey, we basically have two different churches where the people in these two different services never see each other. And why? It's just because of the style of music, essentially. And so what did we do? We moved them back together and we said, hey, now we have one church, but what does it actually mean to function as one church? Because we've tried this before during COVID, and we had hymns and we had contemporary songs. And so where I landed was, I need to think about the people in my church that God had placed in front of me to lead, and I am going to serve them. And what do they want? Well, but let's test it out, is what I thought to myself, actually. And not that this is like the end-all be-all of like, we just give people what they want. Sometimes we need to stretch people and teach them to appreciate new things. But if my goal is to help people teach and admonish one another, then first of all, the songs that we pick must be able to fulfill that function, which sometimes I think is severely lacking in contemporary music. But our songs should also glorify God so that we can worship him with thankfulness in our hearts. I think that contemporary worship songs have that part down, but I started testing and I was like, well, let's try some newer songs this Sunday, and we might do 3 newer songs this Sunday. And I'm like, people didn't sing. People didn't sing at all. And then I go back and I do Jesus Paid It All and Amazing Grace and The Mighty Fortress Is Our God and Rock of Ages, and people like sang at the top of their lungs. And I thought to myself, that's why I'm here. I'm here to facilitate singing for people as the musical worship leader. I have other responsibilities as well. But when it comes to the music that we choose, the singing for our services, that's my purpose, is to facilitate the teaching and admonishing of one another through our singing while doing it with thankfulness in our hearts to God. And for me, in my church, the best way to do that was to primarily do hymns or to do modern hymns, which my church is fine with too. And those can serve as the contemporary element, which can serve to, I don't know, please the people who want more contemporary songs. So there's your answer. You can use Reawaken hymns. I guess you could also use multi-tracks if you want to do some more contemporary songs. I'll link both of those websites down below. But also, please heed my warning of blended worship services. I'll link a couple videos that I've made about that idea down in the description below as well. But no matter what type of worship you're leading, one of the important things that we need to do is not just make it about the songs that we sing, but there should be other elements in our worship service, and that involves speaking between our worship songs so that we aren't just singing a set list and then having our pastor come up and preach and then we sing another song and we're done. And that's why I put together 5 worship speaking transitions you can use this Sunday, where you are going to point people to Scripture. You're going to show them biblical truth and lead them in responding to that biblical truth. So if you need help with speaking between worship songs, check that out down in the description below. Other than that, until I see you in the next video, keep leading worship well.